Hello, welcome everyone. We're just letting all the folks in from the waiting room. Welcome to the AMA. We'll get started in just about 60 seconds.
And Gina, you got all the polls queued up?
Yep.
Awesome.
Welcome, welcome everyone. A few more people just coming in. Give it another 30 seconds and we're going to kick things off. Happy Tuesday, everyone. All right. All right. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Gina Waldhorn. I am the Chief Operating Officer of the Sports Innovation Lab. Thanks, everyone, so much for joining us this afternoon for our third installment of our Ask Me Anything webinar series. Really now, more than ever, we feel it's time for the industry to come together to connect and to foster a conversation. And so we've set up this series of Ask Me Anything webinars, which we're looking to host just about every Tuesday and Thursday at 1 p.m. And the goal of these sessions are to help stimulate thoughts around new ideas, strategies, tactics, and really opportunities for the sports industry as we navigate these challenging times. So we're thrilled for all of you who could join us. And we're especially excited today to have two new guests from Q5, which is a expert consultancy in organizational change, which is helping to build better businesses across the world. So a lot of different global clients in different sectors, including and outside of the sports industry. So we're thrilled to have Rick Dzavik and Kat Mullen with us. But before we go ahead and get started, I'm going to do some quick rules of engagement so you understand how this AMA is going to work. Because not only do we have a moderator who is going to be helping to ask some questions, but we want you guys to ask questions as well. So let me just go ahead and bring up some instructions for everyone. One moment. Oh boy. Sorry. Let's see here. Here we go. Okay. All right. So we are going to ask you guys to contribute your questions to today's AMA. And the way we're asking you to do that is through the chat window. So right now, if you're trying to ask a question verbally and you're on mute, that's okay. That's where we want you to be. We're controlling the mute. So don't worry about that. It's not a malfunction of your computer. We'd like you to ask questions by typing into the chat window. This is going to be recording and we want you to know that you can ask anything. So how to ask questions, take a look down. If you're not familiar with Zoom, you've got a function bar at the bottom of the chat screen where you can see a little icon for chat. Go ahead and click on that, which is going to expand a chat window. And you can see at the bottom of that chat window is a little area where it says to everyone and type message here. Go ahead and feel free to submit your questions there. You can submit them publicly to everyone so that everyone can see the question you're looking to ask. Or if you'd like to send the host, myself, or Josh Walker, a private question, you can go ahead and do that as well, and that won't be displayed publicly. Once you've posted your question, you'll see it in the queue, and I will be collecting, along with Josh, and moderating the questions as you send them in. So this is an Ask Me Anything, so please do not hesitate to share anything, ask any type of question that you've got for our guests. So with that, I'd love to introduce first our host, Josh Walker, who is the co-founder and president of Sports Innovation Lab, where he's leading a roster of over 60 clients in the sports industry and helping them to focus on creating breakthrough fan experiences and preparing their business for the fan of the future, something we call the fluid fan. Josh is a former vice president from research at Forrester, and he was responsible for launching Forrester's Wave Evaluation Framework, which was designed to accelerate innovation by connecting technology buyers with the best vendors. So a focus in innovation is something we're gonna talk about today. So thanks, Josh, for hosting today. And with us, we have two guests, Rick Dzavik and Kat Mullen. Rick leads Q5 North American practice. His core expertise lies in organization design, restructuring, and innovation. Rick helps clients make changes that stick by aligning their purpose, people, the work that they do, and the way that they do it. After graduating from Harvard, Rick worked at Accenture before moving into leadership roles at Citi, Bank of America, and Pfizer. So Rick, we're thrilled that you could be with us today. And Rick has brought Kat Mullen, a partner at Q5 Networks. Kat has a combination of strategic, editorial, and operational leadership with a proven track record for driving transformational change, aligning stakeholders, and galvanizing senior management teams to prioritize, align, and invest for growth. Her key clients have included Red Bull North America, Discovery Sports, Samsung, BBC Studios, A&E Networks, and she's done a lot of advisory work for startups as well in the tech, media, and retail space. She's also run Discovery's strategy and digital media for their international profile, and Kat ran MTV Networks in the UK, as well as leading content partnerships for Daily Motion in Paris. So a ton of fantastic global media, operational and structural experience across our two guests today. So with that, I'd love to turn it over to Josh, who's going to get us started with some initial questions before we field your questions and move into the AMA. So Josh, take it away.
Thanks, Gina. Rick, Kat, thanks for joining me today. So you guys understand that we've been doing these now for a few weeks, and if you've been following some of the things I've been posting on LinkedIn, there's two real purposes. The first is to give you a little bit of a break, right? Get your head space out of what you've been reading in the news and really just try to think about something different and exercise your brain in a new way. I think that's so important for all of us right now. So I really applaud you guys for taking time and joining us. The other thing that I hope these do is they let you think about how to really get through this period of time. And what I try to do is I try to put myself in your shoes, which is if there's something I need to get done in the next few weeks, who do I need to hear from? Who should I reach out to? How should I think about this? And as we were going through that exercise as a team at the Sports Innovation Lab, you know, we were fortunate enough to think about the Q5 team and all their experience in an adjacent industry in media and how that could be applied to sports. So Rick and Kat are going to give us some of those bits and those, experience point of views on where we could be as an industry. And so what I'd like to do is just have you guys think about what they know about media and apply it to sports so that we can actually start to move forward. So this should be an hour for us to kind of put our heads in a different space and really start thinking about things other than what's in the news, okay? So that's my little soapbox, that's my get us started, but I want to turn it over to Rick and Kat with something that I think would be helpful, which is, guys, given your experience, and we're going to touch on everything from crisis management to organizational strategy to innovation, but in your experience, when you've been through some of these cycles in other markets and some of the issues that are confronting executives right now, give us a frame of reference for like what you think the headspace of an executive should be right now based on what you've seen in the past. Rick, you want to take it first?
Yeah, I'll take it first and then pass it over to Kat. So my background in this and kind of this reflecting over the last couple of weeks, it goes back to my days at Accenture, where large first outsourcing contract in financial services went bad, to my days during the financial crisis at Bank of America, to helping business units that were kind of failing. And I think the heads of the CEOs and senior leaders are focused around kind of cost containment and those immediate issues to keep the business afloat. Everyone's talking about cash is king, but I think here with some reflection, and hopefully we'll talk through some of those tips. People can kind of take a step back and say, what does success look like as we get through these next 3, 6, 12 months from now? And use that as a guidepost. So as you're making immediate decisions, they have somewhat of an eye to the future without a lot of bureaucracy or process around it. But I think that's really the key, is have an eye towards the future while you're having the other eye focused on today. I think that's one of the key lessons I have.
Kat?
Yeah, I definitely think that is important. But it can be so hard with some of my clients right now. They're just in massive panic mode, right? You're losing 90% of your content, and you're a live sports network, or you're a live event business, and your revenues are tanking, your ratings are tanking, your viewership is tanking. So I think on the one hand, as you move into crisis management, if you don't have a crisis management plan in advance in ahead of time, which is obviously the ideal situation for everyone, and obviously very few of us actually do that, then I think you also, whilst you're doing that, I think you want to try to avoid the scenario where you're just saying, oh, okay, well, what we can do is we can use this as an excuse for hiding all of our sins. We can do tons of write-offs and cut costs and restructure, and many of these things probably need to be done. But I also think it's an opportunity for leaders to not go into lockdown, not do what feels natural if you don't have a plan, and panic or be paralyzed, which I see in some of the business units that I'm working in. And instead really think, okay, how do I assemble a SWAT team? I need a SWAT team, and I may not have those people in place. I may be a rights holder without that type of structure, in which case, who can I tap into? What type of skill sets do I need? Because maybe my ongoing operating team is not the actual team that is going to be best to lead me through this crisis. So for one client I have that I think has been really successful in managing this, immediately said, you know what, I told my entire team, this is a very big business in a European market, said, I told my team, we are no longer in the sports business, we are in the news business. And we need to now be remote. He, immediately got, 30 of his journalists, supplied them with remote PCRs, got everything up and running, somehow was able, with some problems, integrating with their direct to consumer OTT service. Haven't been able to sort out the linear as well yet, but on their OTT service, they're doing a daily live show 3 hours a day. They got it up and running in a matter of a week. And you sit there and you say, wow, that's a real decisive type of person. So when you're thinking about, if you don't have the people internally, then maybe think about people in your network who've worked in news before. Think about an organization like Attention. I don't know if you guys know them. They're a sort of a pro-social Facebook group, very high engagement. They're really able to move very quickly and agilely in order to really just meet this new way that consumers are going to consume sports content. And I think that's something that I really think that you want to do, is to try to remain calm, get the SWAT team, over-communicate rather than under-communicate. Don't go in lockdown. Don't use words like lockdown. And even if you can't access your facility, there's still ways of getting live and interacting with your fans. And you can really use this as an opportunity to test. You can use this as an opportunity to really figure out who the best leaders are in your organization, who work well under pressure, who are great communicators, great leaders, bridge builders.
So let's talk a little bit about that as we get into the specifics of next steps. One of the things that you just said that I think is really interesting, and Axios just came out with some data on this, which is that news has become the new diversion, right? Like that people kept saying, oh, well, esports is going to fill the gap, right? There's this big programming hole and esports is going to come in, and people will find diversion in that. There's a couple problems with that strategy, not to mention the fact that there are usually different demographics or different psychographics that like one form of entertainment versus the other. But the other challenge is that esports has been impacted pretty significantly by this as well. So when we think about news, and you guys have some experience not only in media with the news business, but also in print, what are some things from a communication standpoint? Rick, we talked about this before we got on the call with everybody else. What is the communication strategy around this? What is a news-like response to this that would seem prudent given the crisis management you've seen in the past?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. What organizations, if you just look at the print business, it's going fundamentally in, you know, there's the race to the last couple of people standing. I think the thing to learn is these kind of crises, there's opportunity in it. And what organizations that we've seen have been somewhat successful position themselves well is they've set up a set of scenarios in this crisis. So what are some likely outcomes? So how do we, if there's more demand for news today, how do we set up so we get more people on the digital platforms? So they're looking at opportunities as their whole business, not just individual sections. So look to test, build new capabilities, and
when they set up those capabilities in a period of crisis management, are those set up for the idea that they'll persist after this? Or is it very much what Kat said, like there's a SWAT team approach, which is like you have to have a group of individuals in your organization that you can deploy quickly to take advantage of a near-term opportunity?
I think it's both. I think, you know, right now, if you're in crisis mode, you're not really worried too much about that future. You're trying to stopgap, you know, limit the loss, or, you know, position yourself against a competitor potentially. But ideally, from some of our other experiences in hindsight, if you set up that planning and that task force team in the right way, it can have longevity. Secondarily, Kat mentioned it too, is you can find hidden talent, you know, people within your organization who might raise their hand and say, hey, I'd like to kind of get involved here. One of my clients 4 or 5 years ago, she raised her hand. She was in the internal communications department. She's now been promoted a number of times, and she's now in a technology function, right? Because of that experience on that task force. One, I think key skill sets to look for: great connector, really strong communicator, can figure out how to get things done with others, right? So those are the key people to bring on to an event like this, right? Because again, those skill sets kind of we will get through this. Identifying that type of talent that can really help your org now and in the future.
So Kat, Rick talked about the type of profile of somebody who may lead the task force, somebody who's a great communicator, somebody who's a connector. Who makes up the task force? In a response situation, you mentioned, man, the best case scenario is you already had this thing set up. You did your contingency planning. You were ready for this. We all acknowledge that this is a blindside thing, and a lot of other things could have blindsided us, but this is really, everybody uses the word unprecedented. What would be the composition of that task force? What types of roles and things are they doing in the next 3 weeks when everybody's freaking out?
Well, one, I think you need to have somebody from every department. You know, your traditional media kind of silos, whether, you know, programming, PR, legal, HR, production, operations, finance. Everybody has to be involved. I think where it gets really tricky is this is a space where, you know, we all saw this I'm just going to go back for a second. We all saw this in the music industry, right? Where when I was at MTV, obviously music was still very relevant at MTV, and you saw the value changes, the economics change and shift much faster than probably the record labels certainly would have wanted, and the economics shifted pretty quickly from the labels to the platforms. And I think what to me this is all about is that sports, as Rick said, is the last man standing. Live sports, it's the last man standing of traditional media. This is, no matter what happens, like how you handle this crisis, it's going to exacerbate and accelerate the shift from traditional broadcast to direct to consumer. And so those that already have a strategy and understand that that's where they're going, and can put that task force into place to say, we already know that that's our North Star, whether we like it or not, that's where consumers are going. So how do I use this as a way so that this SWAT team and my senior leadership actually is going to be able to learn and move and adapt more quickly to where they're going to need to go anyway. And I think that's really hard, because what that means is older people, like say us Gen X people, we have to listen to actually younger people, because they tend to have be able to be more agile, understand some of the technology in a more forensic new way than we do. And I think that's really tough when you have this really traditional management structure of like, EVP, SVP, VP. Companies, traditional companies just do not work that way. So I have a company that has acquired a whole bunch of digital assets, whatever that means today, but companies that are super agile that were immediately like, right, let's get this in front of the president. This is our replacement plan. We've got some gold events that are getting canceled. This is what we're going to do. They're out there. They're getting it done. They got it approval. And the traditional guys are still trying to figure out what the revenue and cost impact is, and they're paralyzed. So
let me pause you there, because I think that you touched on something that maybe you have enough visibility into how media responded to address this. Everybody in sports has been looking at these OTT platforms as the new distribution channel direct to consumer. It's been on the radar screen, and people have been talking about it ad nauseum for at least the last 24 months, where there's been all these conferences about OTT. You have DAZN, Delta Tray, 11, all these different platforms that are coming out, ESPN Plus, NBC Gold. There's tons of them now. And the thinking is that, oh, of course, this is going to accelerate the distribution of those platforms and the adoption of those platforms. But if the industry wasn't set up to really take advantage of something like this, meaning that there was content for them, or there was a plan to promote them, or there was an alternative model to that, how are we not going to be in a situation where we're just mired in make goods and legal battles where everybody's just kind of looking for the money?
Yeah.
Give me the media corollary to that, because I want to be an optimist, but I feel like everybody's going to be, covering their butts.
Yeah, I think it's going to be both. But look, at the end of the day, I think it's going to be, there's going to be those people who are aggregators, sports aggregators, and those people who are going to sell their content to those sports aggregators. Like, I think that it's very similar to the regular sort of scripted or general entertainment space. So those people who have enough content, both live content to drive subscription, and then volumes of content to drive reduce churn and get you below that magic number of 7.5% churn a month. So those people who have a lot of volume of quality content, a lot of like live sports to drive people to drive subscriptions that's exclusive, will become the aggregators, and those that don't will have to sell their programming to them. And I think there will be massive consolidation after a period of legal messiness. I mean, we dealt with that at MTV. I mean, I left MTV and went to Dailymotion, and then obviously MTV sued Google, sued YouTube for, I don't know, $1 billion, and went sort of this litigious route, and tried to sue Google instead of actually saying, well, wait a minute, what does this mean for the way our consumers want to consume music and watch short form content and reality content, and why are we not thinking in that way, and instead we're suing? So I just think those companies, and I think there will be tons of litigious, especially in the US market, which is a very litigious market anyway. But I think you'll see tons of that. I think you'll see a lot of companies that go that route, and then I think you'll see companies that will say, wow, this is just going to accelerate the shift from my traditional business model. How can I drive live simultaneous reach on mobile devices instead of just old-fashioned, broadcast signals? How can I take my DNA of what is great about live sports, which is live simultaneous reach, amplifying that experience on the ground, which is so magical, and trying to amplify that across lots of devices, not just one distribution platform. And I think that's where the companies that will really get it are going to really crush the people that don't get that.
And Rick, we talked about this before we got on the phone too. There's a process that Q5 does with its clients to do risk assessment in a moment of crisis. That there's probably a really helpful framework for the people that are on this call to think through when it comes to what questions should they be asking and how should they be triaging this situation. From your experience, from the work that you've done in the past, do you start with your account receivables? Do you start with your largest account? How do you think about where to begin doing the risk assessment to the business so that you can start mobilizing this task force?
Yeah, I think the first and the hardest step is always to take a step back and take a deep breath for a second. And what I mean by that is typically, each organization is very different. Some are very siloed, some are more networked in how they work. But I think either way, under times of crisis, is getting people aligned around a clear elevating goal. That's just beyond the here and now, which is in some cases survival. So I think that the first thing for teams to do is spend some time brainstorming, what does success look like in the near and longer term? Can we whittle that down to the top 5 or 8 things that we'll get on to categories like cash flow, employee engagement, partners and partner relations, content creation, whatever those things are important for your business to really align around. So again, as you're making decisions, as things come in fast, I mean, just look over the past 12 hours with the IOC canceling. If you had a set of parameters or questions or principles in place that could help you make what are our potential options. So phase 1, I think, is to determine what does success look like. So it's easier said than done. People don't always do that. I think the second piece too is, can you quickly identify a couple, 2 or 3 scenarios? Best case, likely case, and worst case. That's one simple way to do it. And really understanding where the risks, opportunities, what assets you have that could help you. Those could be people, experience, network, cash on hand, whatever those things are. And based upon that, kind of help you decide, okay, how do we start making decisions towards a likely scenario, the scenario we should be, and meeting daily, right, to capture those lessons learned. So it is that kind of crisis management task force where you're trying to reinforce improving communications across groups, right? So
yeah. So I mentioned this to you guys, and your media experience and your industry experience outside of media as well is really valuable to a sports industry that has grown up as a seasonal business, right? A lot of sports have been built out of the idea that they have a season, and during that season, they hire a bunch of variable workforce people, event staff, concessionaires, all this stuff, and then they disband and then they do it again. But now they're owned by these ownership groups, and they're like real media companies, right? If you talk to Wick Grossback and you talk to Ted Leonsis and these owners that have multiple teams, multiple properties, they now own multiple businesses. But yet they don't have the typical management teams. They have a bunch of GMs or directors that run different parts of their organization. How do you start in a group like that to say, Kat said everybody needs to be involved. People from HR, people they don't have those traditional stovepipes in the traditional sense. So put yourself in their mindset, right? They're executives. They're looking across this organization. A lot of the people that are on this call either work with them or for them, and they're trying to figure out what can I do to raise my hand, or how do I get involved in something like this without making it a circus? What's the first thing you guys would recommend somebody do? You said, take a deep breath. Okay, so maybe after this week or next week, hopefully we can do that. But what are people doing to kind of get this ball moving, to get the momentum back into their organization? Either of you can take that.
Rick, do you want me to take it?
yeah, you start and I can jump in.
Oh, okay. Look, I think it's so important to, I hear a lot in the sports industry, and I get it, because you can't even get into your facilities in some cases it's super challenging, but they use this term lockdown. And I just think it's the exact opposite of what you should do. I think you should over communicate. People want to see you, whether they're employees or whether they're partners. And, I think in a way, especially in today's world, it doesn't matter if you have a specific structure with a CEO and an HR department, because, everybody's having to partner anyway. And I think so. Find the right people. You've worked with people in the past. Find the right people. There's plenty of firms out there that can help with crisis management.
But is that the recommendation, Kat? Is it to go out and get somebody to come in and look at my organization for me, or is it me sending a poll?
Look, every organization is going to be different, and you're going to know your own DNA. But I think most organizations, especially really large global organization or rights holders, like you said, the sports leagues are massive now. They're global. I was talking to guys in Germany, and And, because we were talking to some folks from ESPN about football, the NFL, and I said, well, maybe it's not super relevant for you. And he goes, oh, the NFL is huge here, in Italy, the NBA is huge. And so, these are huge global businesses now. So, I think everyone's going to be different, but I do think as you're growing your businesses internationally, you're compounding the potential problems if you're not having a really focused SWAT team who is empowered to make some decisions to help you through this crisis period. And I think, again, look, if you can put an internal team together, that's the best. If you can't, and you've got some people you've worked with for long periods of time that you trust, that know your organization, because the other thing you don't want people to do is you don't want people to use this for personal gain, to try to take over someone else's business or whatever. You want people who are objective. So, sometimes we consultants, are a pain, and I hear that, but sometimes consultants can be valuable, and sometimes this might be a good time if you don't have the right people to do it. I mean, I would always think you'd want to try to leverage your own employees first, because you want to give them a chance. As Rick said, you want to try to work internally first. But if you can't do that, I would say, look at people from the news industry, people who can handle super high pressure, who are agile, who understand maybe technology a little bit better than you do, and don't be scared to hire people who know more than you.
So while you're answering this, Rick, because I'll give you your shot, I also want to start switching gears out of crisis management mode into sort of like this professional development skills and talent mode. So while you're answering this question, Gina, can you launch one of our first poll questions? But go ahead, Rick. Do you want to weigh in on?
Yeah, I think, every organization is different, as you and Kat said. I think if it's not something you can get cross-functional teams formally together, you and your role applying those same techniques, what does success look like within my organization, outside my organization? Who can help me actually achieve this outcome? So I think you can, it can be within your responsibility area, or it could be across your team area. And I think these techniques are both applicable, because at the end of the day, this is about helping you, one, survive now, right? While you're starting to put an eye towards this future,
So each of you have just received a polling question, so take a few seconds to answer it. What these poll questions are designed to do is to get you to start thinking a little bit about, like, what would you have done differently, or what would you have had on staff if you had your, ability to roll back time. But also now thinking about, again, going back to how I started this call, your headspace is like, okay, this will pass. What would I wish was in my organization now that would have helped us be a little bit more agile? So as you're answering this question, all of the potential answers aren't here, but a number of them are, and this is very tech biased. So we're looking at, like, what are the tech skills that you think the organization or sports organizations in general are missing that would have enabled them to be a little bit more agile?
Is that for me or for Rick, or?
You guys don't get to answer the polling question.
Oh, sorry.
Everybody else saw it on their screen, hopefully, and got to answer. Gina,
Yeah.
do you have the responses? Are you still waiting? There we go. So the responses say that digital programming and data skills and tech partner and business management skills were at the top of the list. Security, privacy, and product management were lower. Obviously, one of the things that we've heard a lot, Rick and Kat, is that this industry also relies a lot on external consultants, vendors, to support critical pieces of their operations, especially those global businesses. The Olympics, for example, outsources everything. So what have you seen your clients do particularly well when it comes to vendor management and getting some of these critical skills that sports hasn't been able to hire, and managing them in a position where they could be called on, or you could flip the switch if you needed to? What's a good strategy for keeping those vendors or those partners close without burning through so much capital that they're just putting bodies in your office the whole time?
This is from more traditional media. I think the data skill set is actually really key. Far as, if you have that appropriate data scientist or data analyst to understand where there are opportunities with that partner. So you have that kind of, that role of kind of business development, partner management, relationship management. It's got to be fed a lot, I think, from the data stream is where we've seen organizations really accelerate some of their innovation and ideas that wouldn't have been possible otherwise.
So just real specifically, when you come in a crisis management situation and you need data to make recommendations for this organization, are you in a mode where you're like, oh man, they don't even have what we need to look at? And then what is the immediate response to that? Because my sense is if you went into one of these organizations at a global scale, that's running businesses in different markets, and you said, look, we need to very quickly figure out how to do risk management here. Would you have the data you need? And then if you don't, what do you do?
Well, I think it really differs. I see a huge continuum, a huge spectrum. I think I have some clients who kind of got that early on. They know the importance of owning their content, of owning their distribution, owning the consumer relationship, and that making decisions with the data. I think what I find astounding, so there is a set of clients that I think are doing that and then are very smart about their PR strategy and crisis management, right? And then there's others, and you might put the IOC in there where, yes, it's so broad and they have so many vendors and everything is outsourced and it's very difficult to get people to agree. And one could argue that, the information they had about from their athletes, from the federations, from various countries, perhaps they hadn't done a hugely great job of collecting that information when they came out with statements like the games must go on, and because then you come across as very tone deaf, right? So I think it is really tricky. The PR thing in general, I think, is really, really tricky because I think most are going to get it wrong because everybody's going to kind of rush to do something that's right. But then if you don't link it to your DNA or if you're not really listening to your
well, that's a real, sorry to cut you off, but that's like a really important point because there are crisis comms PR teams, right? I think a lot of reactionary stuff is to work with your internal PR team to try to come up with the right voice for these things, but it's a specialty in the market.
Oh, absolutely. And these people probably should be listened to. I mean, the PR thing is so dangerous if you get it wrong, but really valuable if you can get it right. I mean, I saw the Vita Coco guy, on LinkedIn the other day who said, we're making a lot of money. We're profiting a lot off of this terrible tragedy and this terrible pandemic. And so we're going to give $1 million of our incremental profit to 2 charities, American charities that I believe in. I think that was a good response. I think that's it. That feels right. That feels right with stuff he's done in the past. Where it's wrong is you get some companies that are brainstorming like, hey, we need to do something around the environment because this is linked to the environment. And then you look at them and you're like, well, you might have Formula 1 on your channel. Maybe that's not the greatest message. Or you have tennis, and tennis players have huge carbon footprints. So really you need to think really carefully before you act on this. And I think, to me, actually, the most important thing is the internal communications with your employees and really making them feel safe, your partners, your athletes, and that's why I think the IOC was so bad because, it's like, wait a minute, you want, one, how are your athletes how's the qualifiers gonna work? 2, what about their safety? What about all the people and the freelancers who have to work and what about their safety? And I don't think it was well thought through. So I think the first step is just focus on your internal communications, be really over communicating, make them feel safe first, make your partners, make your athletes, your talent, your journalists, your commentators. And then if you can do something for your consumers and you can really do something to give back or show you're not just about cost cutting and you feel it's right in terms of your DNA and it's not jarring with anything you've done in the past, I think it's fine to try to do that, but it's very tricky.
So looking at our questions, we have some folks understandably want to know when do you get a sense that the moment's passed, right? That there's a chance or an opportunity or the urgency to sort of start going on offense or doing something a little bit outside of crisis management? What indicators do you look for? Are they external market signals? Are they internal cultural things? What do you measure when you're like, okay, it's time to do something a little bit different than just risk management and crisis control?
I think it's all the above. And Kat, you jump in here as well. But so again, I think the
Do all
first,
from the beginning, unfortunately.
yeah, and I think it goes back to, do you know what success looks like? You know, how do you measure that outcome? And again, I don't mean necessarily just, you know, kind of revenue or those types of things, but when do you think those things likely will happen? So if you're starting to see, you know, we're seeing some potentially good news in China, for example, right now. They're potentially opening up some restrictions for those who are healthy by April 7th, right? That could be a milestone for you and your company to say, we could start thinking about these types of things and prepping. But right, but I think it goes back to, if you've set your criteria, what does success look like collectively?
So to take that out of like big, like, you know, pardon my French, consultant speak,
Yeah.
what we're doing is we're putting literally milestones based on market activities that we're working towards. So
Correct.
April 7th may be one. We might pick another event that we're looking for to happen, and we're planning toward those events. Now, they may be moved up or they might be moved back, but what you want to do is at least find something in time that you can plan toward.
That's correct.
And the one you picked was external. Are there anything internally? Am I looking anything toward my own employees to say, okay, I'm seeing that my employees are starting to do this now. Again, I understand we're in unprecedented times, but like there has to be, I feel it intuitively by watching my team, right? I can see it on their faces. I can hear it in their voices. I know where they're at, but I have a small company. When you're talking about a global company and I can't see everybody's face and I can't hear everybody's voice, what are you doing?
I have some clients, which I think is really good. They're doing lots of polls, lots of polls, getting like employee polls. Hey, we've got to replace programming. A lot of our programming is gone. Or a lot of our events are gone, or whatever's gone. Like, what are your ideas? And I think keeping people feel like they're involved in the journey, I think is really important. And I think, yeah, and I think using Google or whatever Insta polls to sort of say, okay, we've got, you know, we've now come with 50 employee ideas. Here's the criteria that we're looking for. Everybody vote again. And now, and letting people chat and really read, you know, if you have like a workspace or you have a place where people can comment and employees can comment, senior leaders should read it and they should take it very seriously, because sometimes people don't want to. You know, good ideas can come from anywhere.
But what you said in there, which is really specific, and I think a little bit, we should bring it up, is the idea that you're not just polling them to poll them. You're polling them so that they can see progress of how their voice is being heard, right?
That's right.
Right, which is like, and again, it goes to sort of Rick's point. Like, if you have this milestone, get them involved in having conversations toward that milestone and let them know that they're being heard so that they feel like they're still contributing. I think this concept of empowerment is so powerful. That's a little bit redundant, but it's like the idea that they feel like their voice is actually contributing to when things might change. And
I think that's right. And they're also really panicked that they're going to get fired, right? And we know the sports business, like regular entertainment, you know, we rely on a lot of contractors and freelancers, and, you know, a lot of people rely on that paycheck. And all of a sudden they are really panicked. They're not going to have any jobs. People are very fearful that, not just for their health, but that because revenues are tanking, they see the ratings tanking because the overnights come out, or they see, you know, churn on their OTT services and so forth, because people are cutting back and they can't afford things, or that we have to offer things for free because it's the right thing to do. People they're really worried they're going to lose their jobs. And I think a lot of companies are going to have to lay people off. I do see some companies are trying to be really creative and saying things like, you know, like in Italy, who've been in this crisis about 6 weeks more than us, or 8 weeks more than us, like much deeper into it. You know, you have some companies who are asking employees, well, we don't want to lay anyone off because it's so terrible, but can we ask people to maybe dip into their holiday pay and take one day of holiday a week so that we can keep everybody, we don't have to fire anybody. So I think people are they're really scared they're going to lose their jobs. I think freelancers, it's really tricky because, or your commentators or journalists or so forth, because when this crisis does come out, you don't want to burn those relationships because you're going to need them again once your live sports some of these are very specialist people and you're going to need these folks. And I think companies need to make sure they're thinking about this, and it's not just a cost cutting short-term exercise, but also as you're going to need these relationships after. So
we're 45 minutes in. We would love to end this on a more positive note. Which is hard to do, and understandably, I don't want to be doing it for the sake of doing it, but there are models out there. There are brands you guys have worked with that have navigated very difficult times well. Can I ask both of you to talk about a brand that you think did something particularly well in a moment of crisis and why you admired their response?
Maybe Kat, I'll start. So this was a media client. So again, not sports, but media client a couple of years ago. Business was cratering. Basically, customers were leaving in the droves because of some decisions some previous leaders made. New leadership came in. The thing I'm most proud about that team, it's now 4 or 5 years later, they're now double-digit growth, profitable again. The way that they communicated and engaged that team around these areas, some focused on crisis management, right? Some focused on where we can innovate. Each one, a lot of those people heading those work streams who volunteered, they're now in senior positions inside that company. And the thing I'm proud about is how they kind of communicated and galvanized. It made their organization stronger coming out of it because of the way they were just very collaborative, used to be siloed. They worked very hard breaking down those barriers.
And do you think the leadership change made that possible? Was it something that had to happen to galvanize that team, or was it
in that situation? Yes, leadership at the top changed, but that leader empowered those workstream leaders to get it done, with the caveat of, I want you guys to work across the company. So he gave us some guardrails, but he allowed us to really make it work. And we were lucky that everyone was kind of galvanized around a common goal.
Kat, is there a company that comes to mind that did something particularly well in 2008 or after September 11th? Or
it's funny because I think most of the companies that I've worked for, I don't think it's very natural for them to do that. I do have one client that I think has been particularly good at, as I said, bringing the employees along, taking the advice, really communicating well, having daily communication sessions, making sure people are aware that, people will be let go, but they will keep their health insurance. People will, they realize that they're in a business and that it will have to be let go, but they'll get to keep their, and that they're being very honest. They're not hiding behind anything. So they're planning. I think they're planning very well. And I think that is one example. But, to be honest, I think a lot of companies go immediately into cost-cutting mode. I have to manage the share price, or litigious mode, like, we've seen in the past. And I think all of those are very natural reactions, but I have a feeling that if people could do them over again, they would do them differently.
Okay, well, I'm going to let you both drop the mic. Is there anything you want to say to close us out here, and then I'll summarize and hand it back to Gina?
Yeah, I think, broadly speaking, make sure you communicate, probably 3 to 10 times more than you are today with your teams, with your partners, et cetera. Because again, at the end of the day, business is about relationships. regardless of the outcome you want. So I think communication to me is always my biggest takeaway, and the toughest thing to get peers and leaders to make sure you're doing consistently.
Okay.
I think that's a great way to end. I might just add, and plan for the worst and hope for the best instead of the reverse. I see lots of clients who are trying to do like a 2-month rolling plan and not think about the fact that they might not have any live events for, for more like 8 months. So I think plan for the worst, hope for the best, and try to be positive and comfort your staff, just as Rick said.
Well, I thought long and hard about whether or not this topic was relevant for this period of time, and if the community that we have at the Sports Innovation Lab was ready to start thinking about not only managing the crisis that they're in, and my sense is that they are, and that this was a welcome conversation about communication, about crisis management, about risk mitigation. You guys were champs for doing this. Appreciate you joining, bringing your cross-industry expertise to the table. This is a group of people that are in the Sports Innovation Lab community that are really stepping up to lead. And by joining these conversations, they're bringing back, these recommendations to their team. So I really appreciate you guys sharing what you've learned with us.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for including us. Thank you.
Gina, do you want to wrap up and give people next steps?
Yep. Thank you, Josh. Thanks, Rick and Kat. You want to chat more with Rick and Kat, as well as the Sports Innovation Lab team and other members and participants in our community, join our Slack channel. On your screen right now, you can see bit.ly join Slack SIL is the URL. It's open for everyone to join. It's a place where we want to build community, share advice, and have some business development, looking for different technology partners. Today, we talked a lot about finding the right individuals or extended team members to help you through this crisis. You might be able to do that on our Slack channel. And so we hope to facilitate those types of connections. So please join us. We're going to be doing these AMAs every week, mostly on Tuesdays and Thursdays. We've got a docket of some more fantastic guests. We're still locking in the time. Most likely this will be next week. We're going to be joined by Bernadette McLeod, the commissioner of the A10 conference. So very much looking forward to hearing how the A10 conference is going to respond and operate during today's climate. And that's it. So this is going to be available for you to watch. We're recording today's session, so we'll be following up today's session with an email with a link where you can view the AMA today. So any other ideas, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. And everyone, please stay well.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you so much.